I really lost faith in astrology. Basically, what I thought is, that rationally there are twins and triplets who are born just 2 minutes or 3 minutes apart, and I know some twins who are totally different. Their life trajectories are so different. But astrologically, most astrologers use chart known as Rasi chart, which is the same for everybody born in a 2 hour window. And there is a chart called Navamsa that very few astrologers use. And that chart is the same for everybody born in a 14-minute window, roughly. So twins will have the same Rasi and Navamsa chart. They will have the same Dasha. They will have the same Gochara or transit of planets. So, but we know for a fact that there are many twins who are different. So I said there aren't enough degrees of freedom here for it to be a science in the modern understanding, basically as a structured science. So I questioned it, but the fact that my father was so successful made me wonder maybe there is something here.
Differences in twins who are born 2 to 3 minutes apart? Did your father make it sort of a more refined?
My father never dealt with those examples, but when I, as a scientifically inclined person, when I basically looked at are there enough degrees of freedom in this approach, I realized that there are twins who are totally different, but they have the same chart. So it's basically a conceptual. It's not that I saw a particular chart and I was wondering what's going on here. Conceptually, it did not make sense. It did not add up, basically. So I was inclined towards believing that it's more of an art than a science. And perhaps if you take the charts of twins to my father, his intuition will lead him to say different things based on whatever factors are influencing his intuition. So I tended to believe that intuition has a bigger role to play than rational or logical thinking in astrology. That was my thinking when I was in my teens and early 20s. And after my master's at Rice University, I went back to India. I was there for a year before leaving India again to settle down abroad permanently. So during that year, I focused a lot on astrology. I spent a lot of time with my father. I learned the principles from him again. And this time I was really serious, very committed. Also, one good thing I did is I went back to some old classics which are written in Sanskrita. I realized I was surprised to find that even though people use only Rasi and Navamsa chart, there are 16 different charts that Parashara Maharshi, the father of Vyasa, he defined. And those charts, one of those charts will change every roughly 24 seconds or so. So unless you have the birth time within 24 seconds, those two people are basically different. So then I went and looked at the charts of some twins. I collected the charts of some twins who had major differences in their lives, and things were starting to make sense. Things were starting to add up. But I realized that the teachings of Parashara were not translated accurately. There were a lot of errors in the translations because the people who translated those were Sanskrit scholars without understanding of the subject and the nuances of the subject. And the people who had understanding of the nuances of the subject, because we moved away to the British way of learning, they abandoned Sanskrit and they just learned some principles as some thumb rules basically from their parents. So there was a gap between knowledge of Sanskrit and knowledge of the astrological principles. So I basically said, forget about what books say. Let me go back to the Sanskrita text and let me take a fresh look at things and interpret it. And apart from interpreting, if there are multiple possibilities for interpreting a particular verse, because rishis are not very clear intentionally, they don't spoon feed you. They basically say it in a mystical way so that there is a possibility for ambiguity intentionally, so that people who are not prepared for that knowledge will not be able to decipher it, and people who are prepared for it,
Have adhikaritvam for to receive that knowledge as well.
you need to have patrata. So rishis intentionally do that, and as you do sadhana and as you become spiritually mature and as you become ready, things that did not reveal themselves to you with the same words, suddenly it will just reveal to you. And once it reveals itself to you, yeah, this is it. There's no question about it. Why didn't I understand it before? So that's how I started reading the text of Parasara. It's called
What books did you necessarily read? And it was good that you had a base in Sanskritam. You had already done some very advanced level exams at an age of 11, so it probably helped you. But what books did you actually read?
Yeah, I read some modern books written by Dr. B.V. Raman, Bengaluru Venkatraman, who is a legend in astrology also. But the books that really opened my eyes, because even he used mostly Rasi and Navamsa charts, even though he defined the other charts known as divisional charts and said these are very important, he never really used them. He never really illustrated their use. But when I went back to Parashara, there is a book called Brahat Parasara Hora Shastram. To me, that is basically everything in Jyotish. If you have that book, you don't need anything. All the other books that were written in the last couple of millennia by modern authors like Dr. B.V. Raman or Sri K.N. Rao or Pandit Sanjay Rath or even myself are relatively old books written in the last 2000 years, like books by Mantreshwara, Kadidasa, Vaidyanath Dikshita. All these books are good, but they are not at the same level as Parashara's book. Parashara, before the Kali Yuga was about to start, father of Vyasa,